Hello, Massive. Hello, crew. Welcome back to another episode of Reels and Rhythms. And Reels and Rhythms is brought to you by Carry On Friends in partnership with Style and Vibes and Breadfruit Media. And I'm here with my co host, my partner in creative crime, Miss Michaela. Welcome. Heal up the Massive and crew.
Yes. Wagwan reels and rhythms family. Me like that.
Yes,
Me like
yes.
that creative partner in crime.
Yes. So I think set. So I think set. So for this episode of Reels and Rhythms, we are doing a combo. We're talking about a documentary, so that's a reel, but the documentary features an artist, so that's the rhythms part of it. So we just love when that comes together. And in this episode, we are talking about the Netflix documentary Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell. And it's been out for at least maybe 2 years on Netflix, I'm thinking. And what I love about this documentary, of course, any documentary with Biggie will talk about his death, but this one did not focus on that aspect of his life. It spent a lot of time talking about his upbringing, his influences, and his friends. And of course, you get to see some of what was happening as he was going through preteen to teen to being Biggie, the rapper superstar, and then obviously to his untimely death. And so we wanted to talk about this because, again, respect due to those who put together this documentary because it was so insightful. And yeah, let's kick it off. So, Michaela, we've
We
watched this.
also we can't ignore the fact that by the time this comes out, it's going to be on or around his birthday. So we live in the Northeast area. You live in Brooklyn, so it's kind of like I feel like we celebrate in March and then we celebrate again in in May. So it's almost like he gets two celebrations for the death anniversary in March and then his birthday. So I'm sure there's always something happening in Brooklyn for those two dates that are like unofficial hip hop holidays, if you will. So I think I love the documentary. You and I have watched it probably multiple times. And we both really enjoyed the perspective that it really gave. And I kind of shared on Style and Vibes when it did release that the people them should watch it because it really dives deep into his roots and how he became this amazing talented rapper.
Yeah, so the nerd in me categorize my notes. So the first thing that I think is important is that we talk about the filming and how, what's the word I'm looking for? How his friend Damon and they all had that forethought, that trailblazing mindset to document everything that they were
Mhm.
doing. Because the basis of Biggie, I've Got a Story to Tell is archival footage of their home videos. Basically, Damon's home videos recording every single thing that they did. It was literally, I got a camcorder, I'm just going to use it just to use it. Right. And that sets the basis of the documentary. And the recording, the continuous recording at the time, how I don't want to say genius, but it was something about where they were, maybe the excitement of new money, this new life that made him think about it. But it's also in those simple moments where you're like, they weren't thinking like this is going to be important 5, 10 years from now. They were just like, yo, let's just do this. Like they didn't think ahead. So your thoughts on the filming?
I do, yeah, I like that, and I think that what in them filming, we got to remember like the time, the early '90s is when camcorders really got smaller and a little bit more compact, and people were able to kind of almost like how we would equate a smartphone in the 2000s, or I'm now dating myself, a BlackBerry. In terms of just being having access to like the form of content. So everybody really, not everybody, but it was cheap enough for people to buy and easy enough access for them. It was also probably a way for them to kind of record and remember, very similar to like how we document on social media now, like the events that we go to and what we do from a personal perspective. Camcorders were really a way to kind of document what you were doing with your friends at that time, and you would play back the video when you were kind of just hanging out doing nothing, and to kind of like laugh. So I think that that was probably the intent there. The foresight probably wasn't really there, but because they were able to kind of save all of the fun stuff that they fun, I'm sure crazy stuff that they did on the road, we only probably got to see a small fraction of what was captured during that time in that era. And I loved how they kind of mixed in the footage as well as commentary from those who were in his life from that era.
Also, another point on the filming that we talked about was, at one point in the documentary, Damon said that, at some point along the way, Biggie became self aware of the need to document because he would ask Damon to make sure he had enough tapes, right? And we remember that part of the documentary when Damon said that Biggie directed him to tape the show and keep the camera on the audience because he wanted to see the reaction of the audience. So he knew how to put together his set. It's literally like a sports team who's watching the replay of a game and they're analyzing the game so that they know what to do with the opposing team. So that in and of itself was just hearing him say that, he knew he wanted to know which songs would get like a reaction to film. At some point in the documentary, Biggie would tell the crowd to say hey to Damon with the camera. So when he's like hey, they were like oh, in the camera. So him like paying attention to the audience and just, looking for that interaction was part of the reason why his shows were very good because he was editing his set after each show.
Me not add to that. Add that
Oh,
tight.
okay. So moving on, we want to go to Jamaica. And I mean, every time we talk about Jamaican rappers, some people try to come for me, say Jamaicans want to take everything, but it is undeniable the influence Jamaica has on hip hop, regardless, but on Biggie specifically. His mom is Jamaican. And in the documentary, she talked about every summer she saved up money to go to Jamaica, which is life, right? Every Caribbean kid knows what it's like. Every summer you're going to get sent back home. It's just how it went, right? And his friend, I can't remember his name. Which friend was it? The one in the black hoodie was just like he would come back from Jamaica with all of these Jamaican slangs and music that was new to them. Because Michaela, in a Jamaica, everything play upon radio Jamaica, everything. That's why we know the Kenny Rogers, we know all of the country artists because that's what. And I guess being also in Trelawney, which is considered a more rural parish back then, you're not gonna have a lot happening. So it's radio and party. Um, that's going to keep, the crowd entertaining. Do you remember anything else about the influence of Jamaica?
Oh, there was a lot, I think, they even probably only touched on a fraction of it. I love how they went back and spoke with his grandmother, his uncle Dave, and really captured like the family home back in Trelawney, and really talking about how he used to go to parties with his uncle and he would be singing, and Christopher, cause them never call him Biggie, them call him Christopher. What did I toast with him uncle, and at that time he's young, you know what I mean, so he's able to one creatively do whatever he wants because he doesn't know anybody necessarily there, but he also is not about to get on the microphone and disappoint his uncle, I'm sure. I think we would have loved footage from that era even, but you could even hear and understand like the cadence of what he was talking about. Even your comment about wanting to see how the crowd reacted to the song, that call and response is something that is very specific to what was happening at the time in terms of toasting and selectors playing music and people jumping on the microphone. That was something that he had seen, and then, took that and kind of emulated that same kind of behavior. Additionally, the amount of variety in terms of his style. I remember a specific point where Diddy said, he didn't really rap. He
He's
really
an
had
R&B.
melody first, and it
Yeah.
was very R&B. He wrote like an R&B artist, but he flowed like an MC. And I think that and even like his cadence, I think the reason why he was so different, because there were other Jamaican artists who became rappers earlier than him. You got to think about like Heavy D, um
KRS-One.
KRS-One. You have, oh, there's a number of them. They're just slipping my mind. But what was so different about Biggie specifically was his cadence and his ability to switch cadences within one rhyme. Like, he had so many different flows, and he was one of the first to do that at that particular time. And it really inspired generate and now we take it for granted, right? We hear it all the time in the music. So in some cases it's become standard. And I listen to like a Nicki Minaj really does that so well. Like, creatively, you can hear her doing so many different patterns. Like, she'll do like 5 to 10 different flows in one song, and I don't think she gets enough credit, but I think she really draws on that inspiration from listening to Biggie specifically. And then, she's of Caribbean descent, but you see how that has transcended, and now like that's kind of like somewhat of a
Mhm.
hip hop standard to be considered a good MC. I mean, standards have changed, but I'm just saying, like, from my perspective, I think a lot more people are doing that now. And there are just so many things we could say about, like, and I like that they didn't give it just one spotlight. They kind of kept going back to Jamaica. Jamaica was a heavy reference throughout the entire documentary. When he was alive, I don't think you necessarily got to understand the impact that it had on him. But I think through the eyes of this documentary, we kind of see stylistically, and even like Mr. C, rest in peace, he really, brought that to the forefront as well. Seeing how that kind of played out, I love that it didn't just have one part of the story. It really embodied who he was as a rapper, and they really treated his homage to Jamaica really well.
You said about Mr. C, and Mr. C said he's not sure Biggie understood his Jamaican roots with the DJs toasting and the braggadocious that is part of DJ and toasting and just naturally being a Jamaican, right? And of course, Biggie doesn't understand it because it's natural. It's second nature. You grew up in a house where this is just how you behave. So it's natural. You don't learn to harness that cultural DNA until, later, if ever, because you just said this is just normal stuff. And one of the things that Biggie, so we're getting into his musical influences. One of the things that he had said, he was like, he likes singing, like he was like stylistics and dramatics, and he liked the old school. So when I think of musical influences, the way Busta was influenced by Papa San and Lieutenant Stitchie in terms of their speed in DJing, you could almost hear in Biggie, like he liked the sound of a tenor saw, right? Because tenor saw is like singing, right? But he's not quite DJing, and you have different artists in a similar pocket. Back in the day, you had a Josie Wales, you had, like the person who's coming to mind, Wake the Town, and for like that type of singing but talking, and like, so there were so many. Damn, I cannot remember. Me, big music nerd, can't remember. um
Now the same thing just happened to me. The name just fly out of your brain.
I know. It'll come back to me. Stereograph. Anyway, so all those musical influences just combined, and like you said, he's listening to country, rock, Christian. Growing up in Jamaica, you had bossa nova playing on Sunday, and again, when you grew up in the country, radio is all you have, and party with DJ at toast and people going on the mic. That's what you had in that era growing up. So his musical influences, and then he talked about writing from elementary school, according to his friends, and they talked about when they went and recorded this demo, and you heard him flow over the demo. But there was, I think, one of the things that really captured his influence as an artist, not just musically, was when the jazz artist, the sax player, what's his name, Donald
Donald
Harrison, that
Hart. Yeah,
Harrison,
Donald
yeah.
Harris. Yeah.
Yeah, he lived on the block, and how he, for a while, when he used to see Biggie, he's like scooped him up and said, "Come on." And he's like, after a while, that wouldn't work. But the idea that, he took him to the movies, he took him to MoMA, introduced him to Picasso, and he talked about this drummer. I don't remember if he said he introduced Biggie to the drummer, but he was like, Biggie rapped the way how this drummer drummed in this very melodic way, but if to anyone else it would seem like it's not in any particular rhythm or cadence. And then at one point they overlaid the rap to the drum sequence, and it was just like, this is crazy. So as music nerds, that was just fascinating to see,
I
to
think
plug in the chat.
the other thing, and I really kind of understood it the second time around, is really the relationship with his mother. And even to a degree the lack of his father. And I think you got to understand what their relationship was before he became Biggie Smalls, while he was Biggie Smalls, and almost like post death, what their relationship is. And I think that it's so interesting, right? Like it's funny, like she just embodies all the things of like a old school Caribbean mom, where she very strict, she have her rules, she not make it come in and talk to her any and anywhere. And even in death, he can't get away with him not. She still a mad, she
she's
still a cuss him.
she said, I never thought I would be so upset with a dead person, you know and I was just like,
Yes, yes, yes. And I think consensusly, like if you've ever heard anyone speak about Miss Wallace and everybody call her Miss Wallace, that is like the consensus. Like she don't play. She's like no nonsense, and it's just interesting that he had. I guess because he's a latchkey kid. His mom is working, so he kind of took to this lifestyle that he didn't necessarily need to take on because it was what was cool and what was interesting. So he got exposed to a lot, and he saw a vision for luxuriousness. He saw it in front of him, but he couldn't reach it. And I just feel like the drug game was the way for him to kind of get there easy, because that's what he goes from Picasso to the corner. So it's like he sees that entire picture. And I think you kind of get that in his between his first and his second project. That's kind of the full spectrum that you get, because Ready to Die is it's a darker album than Life and Death, but Life After Death, I mean. And I think it's just it's interesting from an analysis standpoint, like the breadth of who he was and what he saw. It's like what he saw in front of him versus the vision that he saw, and it almost seems like he was always trying to connect those two.
so before me forget, I remember it's you, right? Say wouldn't have stopped annoying me. But at one point in the documentary, Damon was like, he was looking at Biggie dressing in like three-piece suits because they went to a private school with Herbert Sam, which is the friend who said as children of immigrants, they were well aware that their parents came with aspirations and the pressure from that, right? But he wanted to be like Damon. Damon was like, yo, I want to wear uniforms like y'all because, that's the life other than what's out here. And he just kept seeing a different, he thought the grass was greener on the other side. And when his other friends were getting into things, and as I was watching it, somebody will say, it's easy to say a parent went wrong. Nobody would ever say Miss Wallace went wrong other than trusting our child when him say X, Y, and Z, right? But the influences that or a child sees, you know, which they're seeing more than their working parent is a very strong influence. And even when the community was trying to help, as in um the jazz artist
Hearing
Mr.
him.
Donald,
Mhm,
yeah, and other
mhm,
people, that could only have that pull for so long. And so
mhm,
you see the tension with, he's seeing the streets, it's calling him, and they're all doing whatever they can. Even their friends, even his friends are like, no, you don't want this life. Everybody's like, no, you don't want this life. And still he chooses that life. And it's not until really the death of, and I mean, there were so many moments where it could have gone really left, right? But it's in watching it, it was like, yo, parents do the best they can. The community do the best them can. The friends were doing the best they could not to get him in the life, but he still, at the end of the day, he still had choice, and he made a choice. Even if you didn't like it and if you judged him, he still made a choice. Um, and that was very interesting to kind of just soak in. Like, there's still choice. And, as much as it pains me as a mom looking, because you have boys, pains me to think that, boy, you go through all of this, and you know I think Miss Wallace, maybe from her perspective, you should train him up the way he should grow, and at some point hope say him navigate back to it. Even the man in the record shop, when he said, yo, me just drive, I'm gonna sit them on the block, I'm gonna scoot them up, and we just go up on the belt. Everybody just wanted them to stay off the road, if that makes sense, right? And I thought that was just really, really fascinating, because if you didn't hear these personal stories, you would just feel like he was just left to his devices, and that you hear that that wasn't the case.
but and even to a degree, he understood. He tried to separate Christopher Wallace, who he was as an individual, to his mom, and protect the image that his mom had of him for as long as he could. So he consciously knew that I shouldn't be doing this, but because I want the whatever it is that I think that this is going to bring me, I'm going to pursue it anyway. And it's not until he has this brush with potential death that he essentially decides to move in a different direction, but I mean, he's still moving pretty similar. You
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
like he has a different inspiration, and he gets a different gusto for rapping and using that as his creative, but he's still in the streets while he, is essentially signed and not really seeing any money. So I think that, that's also a thing too.
I think even the point where, you know like you said, Biggie's relationship with his mom, Miss Wallace. I love Miss Wallace. Remember a couple years ago on MTV, Ananda Lewis was interviewing her, and she asked to pick which artist she prefer, right? And Trevor mother went up on it. Trevor, aka Busta Rhymes, right? So they listen. So both of them were on there. These two women with thick Jamaican accents. And then they were like, I don't remember the show they were supposed to be picking. And they asked her which song, and she said, "You know, me prejudice, because this is a very old school Jamaican thing. When she meant she prejudiced, she meant that, she had a bias really in
Mhm.
Caribbean parlance, right? So I think she
Mhm.
either picked the Puffy song or something, but so very Jamaican, but also because it was just them, a relationship that they just understood. For instance, when the mother friend said, "Oh, I listened to Christopher album and the profanity," and then she confronts him about the profanity, and she said him said, "Ma, you're not supposed to be listening to this. This is not for anybody over 35." And she said, "Oh." And she said, "I'm not listening to it because my son told me not to listen to it. So I'm not listening to it." And somebody might say, "Boy, if your son had create this all like," she was just like, "I'm not gonna kill up myself. Me, I make him live him life." And if he said she also wanted to protect the peace of her relationship with him to a certain degree. Like, what's the point of having this cantankerous and contentious relationship if even if she talked to him about it, he's not going to change. So him said, "Don't listen to it, I'm not gonna listen to it and keep moving." So big up to Miss Wallace for um being that Jamaican mom who was just like, "Me mean business, but cho, him over here, so me over here." So,
Me over
oh,
here, me I do my thing, me I do my
yeah,
thing.
yes. So, just I just thought that this was a more personal story, and it was refreshing to see outside of speculation on who shot him, what happened the day before or leading up to the time he died. Um, it was just good to see not only his connection to his Jamaican culture, but the relationship he had with his family, his mother, and his friends, and how they all knew like this ain't the life, but this is what we got to do. And how they kind of pull themselves through that, you know?
Mhm. 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 I think yeah, I'm sure like for them, I think D-Rock had mentioned that he's just like, I couldn't even believe that this was how like when your friend gets famous and they they kind of have this admiration. He couldn't even believe it himself. He's like, I just see, Biggie as like his friend. And so to see how people respond to him from a fan perspective is probably still very interesting to them because they just know the relationship. Like we miss them as fans, we miss them musically, we miss, what like there's always the conversation of what would have been, right? But for them, they have this personal connection to him where they're constantly reminded of his presence. I mean, if you walk anywhere in New York or specifically in Brooklyn, I'm sure you hear his voice and see him on a mural or someone quoting him in just like everyday conversations, seeing his face on t-shirts and stuff like that. So there's this constant reminder that one, he had such a huge presence, but he's also missing from their lives. And I think that that's what the documentary actually really brought across really well is the relationships that he had with people prior to his connection to Bad Boy and his artistry. And I don't think we until then we really didn't get to see that. So like it's not like there were heavy documentaries, there weren't a lot of interviews, like even seeing him in the unsigned hype edition, the source, like those are things that just don't happen anymore. And if you don't document them in this style, you won't necessarily know that they happen or that they exist. So I love that his family is really keeping his legacy going by putting out projects like this and really um promoting. I feel like every other year we get something new from his estate essentially. So
what I learned from this documentary was why he went from Biggie Smalls to Notorious B.I.G. He was doing the interview. I think he was in London, and he was like, "Yo, the other Biggie Smalls said he's gonna sue me if I keep using the name Biggie Smalls. So from now on, I'm Notorious B.I.G." And I was just like, I didn't even know that, So him on this archival footage saying that was like, I didn't realize that. I was like, yo, Biggie Smalls, and then he was Notorious B.I.G. It's like those little nuggets in the documentary was just like, oh, okay, you know. Even when he was recording the Ready to Die, he even said like, I wasn't going to kill myself, but his mother had breast cancer, you know, they got signed. Even Damon was like, his song's playing on the radio, but we still out here on the corner. Like all these things are happening. And he was just like, yo, like, me can't manage, me can't take it, and
I
it
think,
was
yeah,
interesting.
and that's like a lot of music with feeling, right? And I think that that's why a lot of people resonate so much with his lyricism, is because it's rooted in a certain level of anger and angst, and particularly on that album. And he had some fun tracks on that one too, but I think you got to really understand like why he was in that space to record that album, and then why he was in the space he was to record Life After Death, because those albums are both classics but in completely different ways. And while his flow and his cadence and his lyricism is still there, he's talking about he's talking in a completely different manner in both of those projects. It's like so different, so night and day. And it really gets back, it really helps us to understand the artistry around a project and what they are into. And now artists kind of release singles, and projects are released in shorter time spans. But these, like, you really got to understand the frame of mind that he was in. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect of understanding, like, that for like it made sense. Like, yeah, I wasn't gonna kill myself, but I felt that intense about what was happening in my life, that's how it came across in the music. And for a lot of people who grew up during that time, they could relate. And a lot of people who go back and listen can still relate.
So along that vein, when he was doing Life After Death, is he was like the Diana Ross, I'm coming out. He was like, yo, I like that joint. I went to a club and everybody just went to the dance floor, and he was like, yo, that's what I want. He's like, I'm not trying to go out here try to shoot somebody so I could put that on an album. Like, that's not where I am, right? I wanna, you know, like a real
Miss a
yard man,
lyricist
just
in full of lyrics, in
and
full of
yard
lyrics
man
for the ladies.
with him chain and the Versace and all of that. Like, I was just like, oh my God. I saw the influence of the uncle car when the uncle put on him shoes and tie up and he crept neat out everything with it. I'm like,
Then
yeah.
you know see all the little phone all start
Oh,
bolt
at the little,
by the side, and they have the little pin on it.
but also there was another part in there that I cracked up. And again, you would miss it, but the Jamaican Caribbean person in me caught it. Like, he was saying something like his mom kicked him out, and so he's not upset with his mom. If his mom was sick I don't remember what it was, and he was like, "What I would say, no, mom, go make your own tea." And I fell out laughing because a Caribbean mom they want tea, so he's like, "No, mom, go make your own tea," and I was just like, "Oh my God, Miss Wallace and our tea."
What am I gonna do with that picnic? Lord God.
Exactly. Right. But again, because it's so normalized, he grew up in a house with a Jamaican mom and they're very Jamaican things. Like, I do now. I do it now to my son Ethan. Ethan gonna make me some tea. Ethan knows how to make tea. So I thought that was like, fun. And he was laughing because he know him get sent out regular for go make tea. So to me that's funny. And that's what I like about it. So we gave you a lot. You could still watch it and enjoy it. You'd probably find your own little nuggets. Because this is Biggie, full disclosure, whole heap of profanity in the song them. So, and throughout the video, but it's an interesting watch, and learned a lot and took a lot from that. And I say, yeah, give it a watch. Biggie, I got a story to tell. And you know what caught my eye? The placeholder image in Netflix. You see a young Biggie with a Jamaican flag behind him. You're like, wait, what
Is
is?
that really? Oh gosh. Yeah, now I gotta go look for it. But I
Yeah,
think I just
because
saw the preview. I was watching it on the TV and I just happened to see it.
Because if you search it, you see young him when he was younger and the
Yeah,
Jamaican
yeah.
flag behind him. So I was just like, oh, what is? So that's what pulled me in. I mean, the Jamaican flag is one of the more recognizable flag because the colors in there
Mhm.
aren't the typical colors in
Yeah.
most flags. So all right, Reels and Rhythms, Massive and Crew. That may I calling in because Reels and
Massive
Rhythms,
Fan
Massive
Crew.
and Crew. Yes,
Yes.
that's how we're calling on. Massive and Crew. That's it for this episode of the show. If you watched it, let us know. Oh, by the way,
Next
you can
week.
text us. Yes, you can text us. But I've learned. So if you are listening to this, right? If you're upon YouTube, you can't text me, but you can comment and we'll, reply accordingly if the comment is appropriate. But if you're listening to it, you can send us a text. In the show notes, you'll see send us a text. And you click on that, it opens up in your phone app, and you could send us a message. You cannot send us voice notes. And if you send us a message, unfortunately, we can't reply back, right? We can see it. So yes, me discover that after the fact. So if you send us a message, we don't know what number. So don't send a message.
Just send me a big up and put your name
Yeah,
on it if you're
yeah.
brave.
Send a send a little thing and just put your name and say yell up, and thing. We love to hear from you. So also let us know if there's a particular show you want us to talk about and review. We'd welcome that too. So want to hear from you. And until next time, Massive and Crew, later, little more, walk good.
Bye.